When we think of medieval craftsmanship, we tend to picture massive oak beams, blacksmiths at roaring forges, and castles standing defiant against the elements. But what's often forgotten, or deliberately erased, is a lost method that made medieval wood nearly immortal. This was no mere seasoning trick or coat of oil. It was a treatment so effective that timber survived for centuries without rot, warping, or insect damage. Some of the beams treated with it still stand today as solid as when they were first placed. The method disappeared not because it failed, but because it became too effective, undercutting entire trades built around constant repair and replacement. This was the medieval wood hack that refused to die, even when history tried to bury it. In the early Middle Ages, long before chemical preservatives or industrial lumber mills, builders were faced with a brutal challenge. Wood was plentiful, but decay was relentless. Moisture crept into beams, insects bored through foundations, and fungus turned entire structures into dust within decades. Yet somehow cathedrals, bridges and farmhouses from the 12th and 13th centuries still stand today with original timbers intact. How? The answer lies in a process that combined timing, water and heat, a trifecta of natural preservation that modern science is only beginning to appreciate. The technique started not in grand castles, but in small village soyards, where carpenters learned that freshly felled wood, handled incorrectly, was its own worst enemy. Instead of drying it immediately, they submerged it. This was known among old craftsmen as water seasoning, and, well, it involved submerging logs in cool, oxygen-poor water, often in rivers or ponds, for several months or even years. Far from softening the wood, this process leached out the sugars, starches and proteins that fed fungi and insects. What emerged from the water was a material that no worm would touch and no rot could find a foothold in. The Vikings used it in shipbuilding, medieval monks used it for barns and abbeys, and, later Renaissance builders used it for bridge piles and mill wheels that outlasted steel. The brilliance of this method came from how it used natural chemistry to purify and harden the wood. When wood is soaked in stagnant or low-oxygen water, microbial activity breaks down the carbohydrates within the sapwood. This leaves behind mostly lignin, the dense, fibrous substance that gives wood its rigidity. As the sugars are dissolved and carried away, the structure becomes less prone to swelling and shrinking with humidity changes. When these water-cured timbers were later air-dried slowly in shaded, ventilated barns, they became almost impervious to cracking. They could be planed and carved like new wood, but they resisted moisture like stone. In archaeological finds, oak planks, treated this way, have been recovered from medieval harbours after 800 years underwater, still solid enough to cut and reuse. Even more fascinating was the discovery that certain waters produced better results. Rivers rich in tannins, such as those running through oak forests, infused the wood with additional natural preservatives. Craftsmen even sought out slow-moving creeks that contained clay sediments, since these coated the wood fibres and further sealed out decay. This was the kind of deeply local knowledge passed through apprenticeships, guarded within guilds and rarely written down. Each region had its own version. Some used running water, others buried logs in marshy soil. All achieved the same outcome: wood that aged like iron. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, as industrial sawmills rose, the old ways of curing wood were dismissed as outdated. Submerging timber for years didn't fit the production timelines of modern economies. Instead, fast kiln drying and chemical treatments took over. The result was wood that was quicker to produce, but, well, far less durable. The irony is that medieval builders had already solved the problem of decay centuries before industrial chemistry even existed. When engineers in the 20th century began restoring ancient cathedrals and bridges, they found the original beams still strong, while newer repairs had long since failed. That discovery led researchers to re-examine the old ways, and, several studies in the 1980s confirmed that submerged wood, especially oak and pine, developed structural stability superior to modern kiln-dried timber. In truth, the method didn't disappear because it didn't work. It disappeared because it worked too well. When ships, barns and homes lasted for centuries, there was little need for constant repair or replacement. Entire economies of carpenters, sawyers and merchants relied on wood failing eventually. The beauty of this ancient trick is that it's entirely practical even today. If you're off-grid, building long-term structures or working in wet climates, you can use the same principles without expensive tools. So, to begin, start by selecting hardwoods like oak ash or elm. Freshly felled logs must go straight into water before they dry out, right? Submerge them completely in a pond creek or even a buried water tank. The key is preventing oxygen from reaching the wood. Oxygen fuels decay, after all. Make sure to secure the logs under rocks or weights to keep them submerged. Let them rest for at least 3 to 6 months, though honestly a full year or more yields the best results. Once removed, rinse them and allow them to air dry slowly in shade with good airflow. Rushing the drying process will crack the surface, so patience is, well, essential. You'll notice that the wood darkens slightly and becomes denser to the touch. This is your natural preservation at work. For those without access to a water source, well, a variation can be made by burying logs in damp clay or mud for several months. While not as effective as water submersion, it still extracts much of the sap and sugars, you see. When used for beams, floors or tools, this treated wood resists swelling, insect damage and fungus for decades. The principle can even extend to modern materials, Builders today experimenting with water-age wood find it ideal for log cabins, fencing and furniture in humid climates. The same technique that kept medieval bridges standing through centuries of rain can keep a modern homestead secure with minimal maintenance. The medieval woodhack reminds us that history often hides its greatest knowledge not in grand inventions, but in patient observation. Those builders didn't have laboratories or digital moisture meters. They watched how wood behaved in nature, how fallen logs in rivers stayed sound while barn boards rotted, and they learned from it. It's a lesson that modern life often ignores, really, that longevity comes not from chemicals or speed, but from harmony with natural processes. The same patience that raised cathedrals also preserved their materials. For serious history buffs and survival-minded builders, this forgotten wood treatment isn't just trivia. It's a proven blueprint for making resources last lifetimes. And in an age where everything is built to be replaced, the old way still stands as a quiet rebellion against waste. If you found this exploration into forgotten craftsmanship valuable, make sure to subscribe to In the Beginning and share this video with others who value historical skill and real-world application. The past doesn't just tell us where we came from, it shows us how to build something that lasts.